You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 640 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. That song you're hearing right now is, of course, Leave the Lights On from our good friends in Passafire. You can check those guys out anywhere you get your music. And today, want to get to a couple of different topics. Obviously, the dust is still sort of settling on free agency, and in fact, there are some players still out there, still unsigned. The Rangers would appear to be just about done, but that's actually going to be one of the topics of today's episode. We're going to talk about Tyler Motte. He is the lone unrestricted free agent by the New York Rangers who is yet to sign anywhere, and he is still technically available. We're going to talk if there's any path for Tyler Motte potentially returning to the New York Rangers next season. I know a lot of fans became a pretty big supporter of Tyler Motte in a pretty short amount of time last season during his brief run with the New York Rangers. You can count me among you, and we're going to take a look. There might be one way that the Rangers might still be able to bring back Tyler Motte. I wouldn't really expect it to happen, but we're going to look at the situation and see if there's anything we can come up with. So we'll get to Tyler Motte in just a second. We're also going to talk about the Rangers' departed unrestricted free agents. As we mentioned, Tyler Motte is still out there. Every single other New York Ranger impending unrestricted free agent for this offseason has now signed with a different team. So it's entirely possible the Rangers don't bring back any of their UFAs from this past season. And we're also going to look at the backup goalie situation. Obviously, the Rangers bring in both Jaroslav, Halak, and Louie Domingue, and we're going to look at how that kind of stacks up going forward. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff I want to get to, but that's the beauty of a daily podcast. We can kind of space it out over some time. I would definitely want to talk more about Vincent Trocheck, how he fits into this team. Got to get to the Patrick Nemeth trade to Arizona, just overall roster construction, and a whole lot else. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and talk about this Tyler Motte situation here. And we got to start with Motte. We got to cover him in today's episode because, as I just mentioned, unrestricted free agency is still ongoing, and technically Tyler Motte could sign somewhere while I'm completing this sentence right here and right now. So we got to talk about Tyler Motte. For me, I would love to have him back. Just an ideal fourth-line player, plays with a ton of energy, really seemed to give the Rangers' fourth line a little bit of a boost as soon as he came over in the trade and, into the playoffs as well. Just a very tenacious player, not the biggest guy on the ice, but one of those guys who, it's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but he plays every single shift like it's his last. And he just seems like one of those guys that if you're on the opposing team, he would just be a complete pain in the butt to play against. Again, just brings a lot of energy. He's a complete buzzsaw out there. And, he's not necessarily somebody who is going to go out there and deliver bone-jarring hits. I mean, he'll hit a little bit. He's not somebody that's going to, I think, try to play the mental game all that much. I don't see him really mixing it up after the play all that often, but he's somebody who just, he's always right there. He's always pressuring the puck. He's always right in your face during a play, trying to get the puck away from you. Excellent penalty killer, aggressive but smart penalty killer. He's like a gnat that you just can't swat away, and I mean that in the most positive, complimentary way possible. And Chris Drury talked about this the other day. He mentioned, he was asked about Tyler Motte and the possibility of still bringing him back, and he pretty much admitted that, he's not so sure that it can happen because the Rangers are pretty tight against the salary cap right now, and that certainly appears to be the case. The Rangers have about $3 million left in salary cap, and they're going to need about $2.3 million to re-sign Kaapo Kakko, so that would not seem to leave any space left for somebody like Tyler Motte, who would, probably be getting around, I don't know, for Mott, maybe like 1.7, 1.8, 1.9, $2 million, somewhere in that area. But we know that he's got to be a favorite of Chris Drury. I mean, for starters, he traded for him this past offseason, looking to obviously strengthen the Rangers for their stretch run and also their postseason run as well. Drury likes those kind of players that are just tenacious and tough to play against. I think that was pretty obvious when the one big move that he was able to make yesterday was bring in Vincent Trocheck, who, again, a complete pain in the butt to play against. We've definitely seen that during Trocheck's time with both the Panthers as well as the Hurricanes. As far as Mott and, the impact that he made on the Rangers last season, once again, came over in a trade right at the 0 hour at the deadline, played in a handful of games for the New York Rangers, got taken out by Anthony Angelo from the Penguins. and then he beat his timetable to come back. The rumor was that Mott was not going to be back with the Rangers unless they made a pretty significantly deep run into the playoffs. But he came back in the first round, got back out there for Game 6 against the Penguins, and scored a big goal in Game 6 against the Hurricanes with the Rangers facing elimination. Somebody that I think did a lot to help this team make it as far as they did in the playoffs. I mean, he's not a superstar player, but like I said, does a lot of the little things very, very well. And again, somebody that just really kind of won himself over among Ranger fans pretty quickly. And there's a lot of Ranger fans out there right now on Twitter or anywhere else that they definitely would like to see Tyler Motte come back as a New York Ranger. The biggest reason, as we've mentioned, as we've discussed on here, why it's going to be difficult to do this is because, say it with me, the cap crunch. The cap situation right now, as I just mentioned, the Rangers only have about $3 million remaining in cap space. Kaapo Kakko needs his new contract. He's expected to once again come in at around $2.3 million, and that simply does not leave you enough money to sign Tyler Motte. And there is one other way that I could see this at least being possible, and the way to do that would be to trade Ryan Reaves. And I'm not necessarily advocating for something like this. I think that Ryan Reaves really made a positive impact on this Ranger team last season. He was the oldest guy in the room by quite a few years. I think he was the oldest player on the Rangers by about 4 years last year. He was 35. Nobody else was older than 31. He's somebody that obviously plays that enforcer role and does that very well. He goes out there, throws his weight around, he hits. And honestly, even if you take away the intimidation factor and the enforcer role and everything, I don't think Ryan Reaves is really that bad of a fourth line player in the first place. Obviously, he plays a very physical game, which is something that you want. And as far as, offense is concerned, I believe he ended up with like 13 points last season, which is not a tremendous amount, but for a fourth liner and a guy whose job is to go out there and once again be the enforcer, I think that that's just fine. And I think Reaves overall had a nice season with the Rangers. I will say the one knock on him is probably in the playoffs this past season. Couple of bad penalties. You ended up being a healthy scratch for the last few games against Tampa because of that. And there were times in the postseason where it just seemed like he struggled to keep up with the pace of play. I don't think that was an issue for him in the regular season, but obviously the playoffs roll around. Everything's moving faster. Everything is more intense. And, Reaves is getting up there a little bit. He is now 35 years old, I believe it is, or I think he's going to turn 36 at some point during the season. Yeah, he'll be 36 in January. So he was never really the most nimble, the most fleet of foot player to begin with, and now that he's getting a little bit older, I think that stands out a little bit more, especially when it comes to Stanley Cup playoff action. But the reason I bring up the concept of Ryan Reaves being potentially, traded in order to make room for Tyler Motte is because, when you look at his contract here, he is currently playing out the second year of a $1.75 million deal. And actually, when the Rangers acquired him last year in the trade, he only had 1 year left on his contract. The Rangers and Reaves pretty quickly agreed to tack on an extra year, extend his contract, and he will, as it stands right now, make $1.75 million next season. Well, if Ryan Reaves is traded, and it would pretty much have to be either for like a minor leaguer and somebody who's not going to make any money, or for a draft pick. If that happens, then that frees up an extra $1.75 million. It's possible you could then use that money, put that toward re-signing Tyler Motte. Because if you take the $1.75 million that's going to Ryan Reaves and the approximately $800K that will be left after the Rangers sign Kaapo Kakko, you're looking at about $2.5 million, which would be enough to sign Tyler Motte more likely than not. So that is an option, and I'm really torn. I mean, they're two very different players. I mean, the only similarity is really that they play on the fourth line. It's tough. I think I would probably slightly prefer... Oh, God. I was going to say Tyler Motte, and then I think about the impact that Ryan Reaves made on this team and, the fact that he gets to play the big brother role for some of these guys. But then you think about Tyler Motte and the fact that you could maybe, extend him beyond this season at a reasonable cost. I think I might have to slightly lean toward Tyler Motte. I will miss Reaves and the personality that he brings and, the physicality as well. But the Rangers have a lot of forwards and a lot of players in general that certainly bring physicality and also guys that can drop the gloves if and when the situation calls for it. So if I was the Rangers and I had this option where I could trade Ryan Reaves for, say, like a 4th-round pick, maybe a 5th-round pick, we'll see whatever they would be able to get in exchange for him. But if they could do that and then sign Tyler Motte to a new deal, that might be possible. The only tricky thing there is if you give Tyler Motte a multi-year deal, then he's also cutting into your salary cap situation for next year, and the salary cap situation is going to be pretty tight next year as well, and you're going to need that money to give new contracts to guys like Alexis Lafreniere and K'Andre Miller, possibly Philip Hedl as well. It's possible that Hedl ends up getting traded because the Rangers just can't afford him at that point. That's another conversation for another day. But as far as Mott versus Reeves, I think I would lean slightly toward Tyler Mott. But I like both players, and I'll be happy with whatever the Rangers choose to do. It's just unfortunate that, again, Tyler Mott looks like has probably played his last game as a New York Ranger, but we'll see. You never know for sure. And speaking of unrestricted free agents on the New York Rangers, we are going to basically just run through the gauntlet next and just kind of talk about, all the departed UFAs and where they signed and how they might fit in with their new team. We're going to go through it fairly quickly, and, at some point we might dive into, some of these contracts and some of these situations in greater detail, but I do want to at least mention, where all these guys sign and share my quick thoughts on that. The players, once again, that will no longer be wearing New York Ranger blue next season. We will do that in just a second, but first, just want to let everybody know, today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. All right, so as promised, we're going to basically just go ahead and run through the gauntlet here of New York Ranger departed free agents. By my count, there are 6 New York Ranger free agents that have signed with a new team since the start of unrestricted free agency yesterday. And we'll go ahead and, like I said, just kind of run through here as far as, highest price free agent to lowest price free agent among these 6 players here. For starters, you got Andrew Copp. Copp signs with the Detroit Red Wings a 5-year deal worth an average annual value of $5.625 million for a total contract of $28.125 million. And I know there's a lot of Ranger fans that were hoping that they would bring back Andrew Copp. I mean, for me, it really is a toss-up between Andrew Copp and Vincent Trocheck. I like both players a lot. I think you can make a case for either one of them. What's very interesting here is that Trocheck and Copp both get the exact same average annual value from their new team. Copp is getting $5.625 million from Detroit. That is the exact same amount that the Rangers will be paying per season for Vincent Trocheck. The only difference is that Vincent Trocheck's contract will last an extra 2 years on top of the 5 that Andrew Copp is getting. Vincent Trocheck will have a 7-year deal with the New York Rangers. And again, it's fine. I mean, like I said, it was a toss-up. I know Andrew Copp is another one of those players. We just talked about Mott. Copp won over Ranger fans in a heck of a hurry and was a big-time contributor for this team down the stretch, producing offensively more than he had really at any point in his career. And I, for one, would like to wish all the best to Andrew Copp with the Detroit Red Wings. One thing that's very interesting here, though, is that Copp mentioned during an interview that he never actually got an offer from the New York Rangers. The Rangers, it sounded like them and Copp were continuing to talk through the weekend, but that nothing ever really came that close. And obviously, if you don't make an offer, you've got no chance of re-signing your guy, Andrew Copp here. So the Rangers, I think that says to me that they were really all in on Vincent Trocheck. They really wanted to get Trocheck, and they strongly prefer him over both Andrew Copp and this next player that I'm going to talk about, Ryan Strome. Ryan Strome, by far the longest tenured Ranger as far as guys that departed here. He signs with the Anaheim Ducks a 5-year contract worth $5 million per season. And, coming into free agency, like I said, I was going to be very, very interested to see between, Strome and Copp, which one of them gets more years, which one of them gets more dollars. We now have our answer. They both get 5 years. Andrew Copp gets slightly more money per season. Again, Copp at $5.625. Ryan Strome at $5 million even. Strome did a heck of a job for the New York Rangers, and they absolutely fleeced the Edmonton Oilers when they traded for him. The Rangers acquired Ryan Strome in exchange for Ryan Spooner, just straight up, And Ryan Spooner, after that trade, only played, I think it was about 35 more NHL games. And Ryan Strome, meanwhile, established himself as a bona fide second-line center. And at some point this offseason, probably in the next week or two here, we're going to give Ryan Strome a proper farewell, kind of dedicate an episode to him. We did the same thing with Alex Georgiev. Anybody who's on the Rangers for a certain amount of seasons and does enough good things for this team, certainly we're going to take the time to send them off in a good way and talk about their career highlights and everything. I realize he was a polarizing Ranger at times, but the one thing that I've always said to Ranger fans, for Ranger fans that have been looking to run this guy out of town for the past year or two or maybe even longer, the one thing I've always said is be careful what you wish for, because as far as the Rangers' second line is concerned, they didn't have anything even resembling an option that was better than Ryan Strome over the past few years. Now, of course, this offseason, they bring in Vincent Trocheck. So Trocheck's a better option to slot in on that second line, which is what I think he will do. He's a better option than anybody that the Rangers have had in years past. But I'll repeat that right here, right now, because you never know how, players are going to gel, as far as like Trocheck and Panarin is concerned. I do think it is a little bit of an upgrade going from Strome to Trocheck. But it is something of an unknown exactly how Trocheck is going to gel with this team, and specifically with Artemi Panarin if they end up on the same line. So again, all the best to Stromer. Did a great job while he was here. We move right along to Frank Vatrano. I was kind of hopeful that Vatrano might end up re-signing with the Rangers. I thought maybe he could be had on like a 3-year deal at $3 million per season, and as it turns out, that's just about what he got from the Ducks. Actually, a little bit more than that. He got 3 years at $3.65 million per season. So good on Frank Vatrano for getting himself paid, getting what is obviously the nicest contract that he's ever had in his career. He was the first of several players that the Rangers brought in at the deadline, and I thought he did a really nice job. The Rangers really needed a sniper, somebody with that shoot-first mentality. That's kind of what they lack, and Vatrano did an awesome job there. He's great on the rush, has excellent speed, feisty player as well, so I'm definitely going to miss Frank Vatrano, but it's probably just a situation where that was just a little bit too rich for the New York Rangers. Once the Rangers brought in Vincent Trocheck, it pretty much meant that Copp, Strome, and Vatrano were all gone. There was no way you're going to be able to bring in Trocheck and also re-sign one of those players. I mean, Vatrano, maybe. If Vatrano was willing to take, a pretty big hometown discount, but even then, you'd probably have to make some other move and trade away some salary, find a way to shed some salary. Just wasn't looking good for any of those three players once Vincent Trocheck was signed. We've also got Kevin Rooney. He signs a 2-year deal with the Calgary Flames. He will make a total of $2.6 million, so obviously $1.3 million per season. And good for Kevin Rooney. This is the first time in his career that he's ever made 7 figures, and he does so fairly comfortably. He's established himself as a solid fourth-line player over these last few years with the Rangers. He's somebody that was kind of a personal favorite of mine, did an excellent job on the penalty kill. He actually had this weird start to the season where he was scoring goals at a pretty exciting clip. You're almost thinking like, man, is Kevin Rooney going to add some serious offense to his game? And he obviously didn't keep that up, but for what he is, a defense-first forward and a really strong penalty killer, a very nice player, and a really nice get for the Calgary Flames, who have obviously had a bit of a tough offseason with the departure of Johnny Gaudreau. We'll even talk about Gaudreau at some point this offseason because the Rangers kind of dodged a bullet there. The fact that Gaudreau went with the Columbus Blue Jackets instead of one of their division rivals, the 3 teams that were rumored to get him, either the Flyers or the Devils or the Islanders. So that's awesome that at least Gaudreau won't be playing he will be in the Ranger division, but not a direct rival of the New York Rangers. Then we've also got Justin Braun. He obviously came over at the trade deadline and did the job that Patrick Nemeth completely failed at doing, which was to give the Rangers a solid veteran presence on the third pairing. I thought he did just fine. Seemed to gel with Braden Schneider pretty well. Did a nice job playing the left side for what I think was the first time in his career. I mean, to my knowledge, he had only ever been a right defenseman. Again, just solid play. Not anything to write home about, but just a very steady veteran presence on the blue line. He actually goes back to the Philadelphia Flyers on a 1-year, $1.75 million deal. I'm not sure why he would go back to Philly. I mean, hey, maybe he's settled in Philly and he might have a home there and they thought there was a fit. He goes back to the Flyers. It doesn't seem like a place that you really want to be right now, but be that as it may, Justin Braun does go back to the Flyers and on a 1-year contract. So, hey, if there's an injury and something goes wrong, the Rangers and Flyers can strike the same exact deal, maybe bring Justin Braun back. I don't look for that to happen. I think at this point, the Rangers are certainly looking to give that 6th and final defenseman spot to one of the kids, be it Zach Jones or Matthew Robertson or Nils Lundqvist. So for that reason, not a surprise at all that the Rangers let Justin Braun walk in free agency. And then the last player to sign, at least so far, would be Keith Kinkaid. He spent the vast majority of this past season with the Hartford Wolfpack. In fact, he played just one game for the New York Rangers. He goes to the Boston Bruins, signs with them for the league minimum, a 1-year, $750,000 deal. At first, when this offseason was about to begin, really begin with free agency starting, I floated the idea of Keith Kinkaid potentially being Igor Shesterkin's new backup goalie, but the Rangers obviously chose to go in a different direction as it pertains to their other netminders. They bring in both Jaroslav Halak and Louie Domingue, and we are going to talk about that in just a second. I should also mention, though, Greg McKegg is the other unrestricted free agent from the NHL roster, and he has yet to sign anywhere. So we'll see what ends up happening with Greg McKegg. But like I said, we're going to shift our attention to the backup goalies, and we will do that in just a second. Okay, backup goalies for the New York Rangers. As we all know, Alex Georgiev, it was inevitable. You knew he was going to be traded. He ends up going to the Colorado Avalanche, the defending Stanley Cup champions. Looks like he's going to get to be their starting goalie there and gets a nice pay raise for himself as well. I believe the extension was for 3 years at $3.4 million per season. So good for Alex Georgiev. Obviously, that also opened a spot on this team as far as the backup goalie situation is concerned. And we spotlighted a few goalies, earlier this week before free agency began, guys that might be options to come in and be the new Ranger backup netminder to Igor Shesterkin. And the guy that I liked above everybody else, my top choice as far as unrestricted free agent goalies who were realistic as far as, coming in and being a backup. Obviously, we're not going to include like Jack Campbell in that. He's going to get his money and be a starter somewhere. But as far as realistic backup options, I threw out Jaroslav Halak as my top choice because, for starters, he's a veteran goalie. I think he's somebody that's been kind of underrated throughout his career. He's never been elite, but I feel like for probably about a decade now, he's been at least slightly above average goalie, starting goalie in this league. And recently, he's kind of been demoted and been a backup in the other places that he's landed. He was with the Canucks last season, not a great season for Halak there in Vancouver, but he played the 3 seasons before that with the Boston Bruins and put up some really nice numbers. And I was thinking that he was the ideal backup for the New York Rangers. I didn't think that he would be in their price range, though. I figured that the Rangers, when it came to backup goalie, they were going to go really cheap. We're talking like $1 million or $1.2 million at the most. They bring in Jaroslav Halak for 1 year and $1.55 million, and it looks like it was a good choice because the Rangers should get in under the salary cap. I know we talked about Tyler Motte earlier. Maybe there would be enough left for him if you went really, really cheap with the backup goalie. Like, we're going to talk about Louie Domingue in a second here. If you just brought in Louie Domingue at $750K, then that would leave you, instead of paying $1.55 to Jaroslav Halak, you'd pay $750K to Louie Domingue, and that would leave you with an extra $750K. So maybe I just talked myself out of this. Maybe it would have been possible to then re-sign Tyler Motte if you didn't bring in Halak and you went with Louie Domingue. But you know what? I'm not going to go that far because I think Jaroslav Halak is quite a better goalie than Louie Domingue. And like I said, I think he was the ideal backup goalie for the Rangers to target. He's got Stanley Cup playoff experience. He's obviously a veteran. And look, if anything happens to Igor Shesterkin, the Rangers are certainly in trouble. You could say that about pretty much any team as it pertains to them, potentially losing their starting goalie, especially come playoff time. But I think Jaroslav Halak, more than guys like, Martin Jones or David Riddick, these are other unrestricted free agent goalies that we talked about on here. I think that Jaroslav Halak, more so than any of them, probably gives you a chance. If you're in the playoffs and you're in a situation where Igor Shesterkin gets hurt, obviously knock on wood there, but if that were to happen and Jaroslav Halak had to step onto the ice for, maybe 2 games, you'd like to think that he could at least win one out of those 2 games, maybe both of them, play solid hockey, give you a chance to win. That's what you want from your backup goalie, and I think Jaroslav Halak is somebody that can do that for the New York Rangers. So I'm very, very happy with that signing as well. Obviously, look, the Vincent Trocheck signing, that's going to claim all the headlines. That's going to be, the front page news and whatnot, but I think the Rangers bringing Jaroslav Halak did very well for themselves. It is going to be a little bit different having to root for Jaroslav Halak after years of him playing for the New York Islanders and the Boston Bruins. He's always been the enemy. He's always been on a division rival or just a rival in general of the New York Rangers. And now he's one of us. And like I said, I think it's a really, really nice under-the-radar signing for the New York Rangers. 1 year, $1.55 million to Jaroslav Halak. And I also have to wonder, obviously the Ranger fans, for years, whenever Henrik Lundqvist was having a big game, making nasty saves, standing on his head, whatever the situation was, you'd get the Henrik chance, right? And now they do the same thing with Igor. And, whenever Alex Georgiev, this would happen every once in a while. If he was having a big game, you'd get the Georgie chance as well. I wonder about Halak. I would think Yarrow maybe would be the chant that makes the most sense. That seems like more fun than Halak. I would say Yarrow is probably the way to go there. But we'll see. Like I said, I think it's a really nice signing for the New York Rangers. And speaking of free agent goalies, the Rangers also add Louie Domingue to the mix. Now, Domingue, obviously, I'll be honest, guys, before that playoff series between the Rangers and the Penguins last season, I couldn't have even, for the life of me, told you where Louie Domingue was, what team he was on. I mean, obviously, I had heard of him. He's been in the league for some time now. He's 30 years old, but I had no clue, where he was. I figured he was in the AHL somewhere, and that was the case. Obviously, he spent most of last season with the AHL affiliate of the Pittsburgh Penguins, but then, they get injuries to Jerry and DeSmith, and Louie Domingue has to basically take over in net for the Penguins. He won that triple overtime game 1 against the Rangers, made some good saves in there, held down the fort for them. He was also exposed at times later in that playoff series. I think the one that really stands out was that game-winning goal in Game 6 where Kreider put it at the net, and it basically just bounced off of his glove, went up into the air, trickled down to the ice, and slid into the net. So Louie Domingue, by no means a world beater, but the price is obviously right because the Rangers got him for the league minimum. They bring him in on a 2-year deal worth $750K per season, and I think I see why Chris Drury did it this way as it pertains to Halak and Domingue. So Halak only gets the 1 year at $1.55 million. Domingue gets 2 years at $750K. And Domingue, very likely, not even very likely, he is going to open the season in the AHL, provided there are no injuries to Igor Shesterkin or Jaroslav Halak. But after this season is over, if you're the Rangers, with Louie Domingue, you have a new backup goalie in place if and when Jaroslav Halak walks in free agency after this season ends. And if Halak does that, and you go with Louie Domingue, then you have saved yourself exactly $750,000 on the salary cap, because Domingue would be making $750K, whereas Jaroslav Halak is making $1.5 million this season. So, yeah, I think the idea there is that the Rangers are going to need every single dollar that they can get, and if Halak is too expensive next season, you let him walk in free agency, you make Louie Domingue the new backup goalie, or at least he'd be an option to be the new backup goalie, once again at just $750K, and you now have a little bit extra money as it pertains to other things you want to do, namely giving money to guys like Alexis Lafreniere and K'Andre Miller. They are impending restricted free agents, as is Filipino. So, again, the Rangers are going to need every dollar they can get. They're already saving money on their backup goalie. As things stand this season with Jaroslav Halak, they will be saving even more money next season if they transition to Louie Domingue in that role, once again at just $750,000. So I like both of these signings by the New York Rangers, both of these goalies, for all the reasons I just mentioned there. And like I said, we're just scratching the surface of all the things that we've got to do in the preseason here. There's other things we got to talk about. We're going to get to that in the next episode. Patrick Nemeth being traded to the Coyotes. I'm also going to talk about why I think Brennan Hoffman or Will Cooley or maybe somebody like Ryder Korzak can and likely will make the team this season. I don't think you're going to see like a bunch of them make the team, but I think one of those guys will make the opening night roster for the New York Rangers. We're going to talk about that in the next episode. We're also going to talk a little bit more about Vincent Trocheck and how he fits into the team as well. The Rangers also signed 31-year-old center right winger Ryan Carpenter on a 1-year, $750,000 deal, so we have that to talk about as well. Very much looking forward to it. We never slow down here on Locked On New York Rangers because, well, honestly, the NHL never really slows down. There aren't too many, slow periods on the calendar when it comes to the NHL. We just had the draft. We just had free agency. Free agency is still ongoing, and we're going to continue talking about everything New York Rangers from here until the start of the season, and definitely looking forward to that for sure. But thank you guys, as always, for tuning in to the Locked On New York Rangers podcast, your team every day. If you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is LockedOnNYRangers@gmail.com. And definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, at @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that is at @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely make sure to subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers on YouTube. Thanks again, guys. I'll see you next time. Thanks for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL. Locked On experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast on all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date on everything in the hockey world. Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute NHL podcast.